with all of my technical difficulties I've had so far. All right, so today we have Jennifer Savran Kelly with us, and Jenn and I met when we both joined the Association for Writing Professionals, Writers and Writing Professionals. I'm not even sure what AWP stands for. I think it's
I
Association
think
of Writers and Writing Professionals.
writing programs, I think. Writers and writing programs, maybe.
Writers and Writing Programs. Okay. And then, but we were part of the writer to writer mentorship program that they had, which is still going on and is doing really well. But we were the pilot program, weren't we? The first ones,
We were.
first ones.
Yeah.
So, and that was supposed to be a 3-month mentorship. I volunteered as a novelist, and you had a novel you were working on, and we worked together. I guess we met or emailed or talked weekly, we had different things we did, or was it monthly, weekly,
I think it was definitely every something.
every something? Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I'd read parts of your novel, and then we'd talk about it, and you would do some editing, and it was a great program. And we ended up going on for we extended after the mentorship, where we just stayed friends. I kept going and just kept editing for a while on that novel, and then you
Yeah.
started working on another novel,
Mm-hmm.
and then recently, one of the reasons I wanted you to be the very first one for this, because you are part of the perseverance that I believe in. Because you emailed me back in January of this year, 2021, that another novel that you had told me about that you were working on is being published by Algonquin.
Yes.
And the title is Endpapers. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that novel?
Sure. I'm happy to talk about that one. So Endpapers is near and dear to my heart. It's based on certain things about my life, but is purely fictional. And so it's about a gender fluid bookbinder in post 9/11 New York who is working on restoring some books at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and in the course of fixing one particular book, finds underneath the end paper a love letter written on the back of an old lesbian pulp, and it's written in German. And they later find out that it's a letter from a lesbian to a girl that she was in love with, and it was written in the 1950s. And so Dawn, the bookbinder, goes and is having all kinds of struggles in their own life, and sort of fixates on this letter and on the person who wrote it, and thinks that maybe somehow if they find that person, it will help them sort of find their own path. And so they track down the author of that letter, and they learn a lot from that experience. So I guess I'll stop there.
Oh, that's where the story takes off. And then we
Yeah.
find out the journey of both characters, probably the person that she finds or they find, and then their whole like story of what happens. So, just so I'm clear, it's present day, but the letter was written in the 50s. Is that right? Oh, wow.
Exactly. So it's post 9/11 New York. So it's 2003 in
Okay.
New York City.
Said that.
The letter was also written in New York City. And so the person who wrote the letter doesn't live too far by. So, yeah,
Oh, that
we're
sounds
too far away.
yeah. No, that's fantastic. It
Yeah,
sounds great. Well, I can't
thanks.
wait to read it, and I think it's going to do really well. When is it supposed to come out?
So we don't have a publication date yet, but it will either be fall 2022 or early 2023.
Oh, wow. All right. So not so
Yeah.
far. Yeah, mine next
Yeah.
is fall 2022. So maybe we'll be on book tour together.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah, I'll bring pies to your book parties.
Oh, wonderful. Even better. I'm going to ask if we can time it with pie.
Oh, I think that's a great idea. That's why mine's coming out in the fall, because it's pie season.
Oh, and is this your pie book?
It is. It's the how to write a novel in 20 pies. Although I'm
Oh
calling it
my
how to write a
gosh.
book in 20 pies. So, and it's about perseverance.
Ah, pie perseverance.
Exactly.
Sorry. Sorry.
No. I tried to use that, but my illustrator is an advertising guy, and he says no puns. I'm not doing puns, so he was. And I do use it once in a while in the narrative of the book, but it's not part of the
Okay.
title. But it was the title I came up with first. So, but yeah, it's about keeping going on that whole novel, like just keeping it going, and it goes all the way through to the publishing stage of the writing life. So I, it's a hard road, but you've obviously persevered, as they say. So,
Yeah.
can you tell that story that you just told me over again about your calendar and how it went from there with the perseverance?
Yeah, so I was saying that I got Amy's invitation to be on this show about perseverance right around the time that my husband had bought me this planner, and it was a planner that was a way to sort of highlight your strengths to help you get through the things that you need to do during the day and be more productive and organized. And so I decided to try it out, and I noticed that every day when I was recording the things that I had done and what strengths I used, and I had to choose from this list of strengths that the book gave you. The one I kept returning to was perseverance. And so whether it was exercising or getting through chores or whatever it was, I kept seeing that word perseverance, and it got me thinking after a little while that I always thought of perseverance as a positive thing, but I thought, if I have to persevere through my days all the time, am I enjoying my life, and is that a good thing? Um, and then right around that time, the Mars rover named Perseverance, I watched the landing on Mars. And so I just was thinking a lot about this concept of perseverance and what it meant for me personally and what it meant in a larger way. And then right around that time, I got this email from Amy asking me to come on a show and talk about perseverance. So it just seemed like a really interesting, like, this is something I'm supposed to be thinking about right now.
Right? Well, it's true, and it's
Yeah.
what gets us through. I believe so. It's interesting. I really would love to know the story of who decided or how they came up with the name of the spaceship, whatever you want to call it, that went to the rover, I guess. How they came up with Perseverance. I mean, because obviously they persevered for that project as well. So,
Yeah.
but I'd like to know how that. I'd like to have been in the boardroom when that discussion was done as well.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to write Endpapers?
You know, I've lost track of that a little bit. A couple of people have asked me that recently. It was definitely a few years on and off. And it was a couple of years of writing and then a year of querying and revising during that time based on feedback I was getting from agents. And then when I finally signed with an agent, there was more revising. And I think we revised for a couple of months, and then we went out on submission, and then there was more revising for my who's now my editor. So it was just on and off for years, just a lot of writing and then revising and more writing and more revising.
Revising takes a lot of perseverance.
It does. And there is more to come because I'm about to get, now that I have the contract, I'm about to get another editorial letter. So
Do you like revision?
I love revision. For me, revision is for me where the art happens
Yeah, yeah.
because I'm not very good at drafting. I don't like drafting. I mean, I like it, but it's hard. It's much harder for me than revising.
And by
So
drafting, you mean like that blank page, like going in and saying, "I'm just gonna see what I come up with," and that part's
yeah,
the part for you. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so once it's all down, you like going in and tinkering and moving things around more. So
Yeah, I say a lot that I feel like the first draft is like the clay and the revising is like the sculpting. So that's where I get my actual art. Like I need the sort of raw matter before I can make my sculpture. So,
right. That's a
yeah.
great way of putting it, and it's very true. And it is more like clay than stone because it is sort of this constant. It is malleable, and we have to always think. I think of novels, especially because they're so big, as malleable that we do need to constantly move stuff around and reshape it. And I'm always surprised at how I have something in mind when I'm writing a novel. It might be a chapter or a paragraph or something, a line of dialogue. It could be any size of something, and I think this is it. It's the bee's knees. This one thing is great. I'm never gonna have to revise it, and inevitably it gets moved or shortened or taken out, or I just never know, and you just have to be open to the whole context goes together. So
Yeah.
I usually have a trash because I can't throw things away, so I have a trash file,
Yeah, me too.
that's like 8 times the size of my novel.
Yeah, same here. The deleted scenes. I actually tell some of my writer friends sometimes a story about you, which was when we were working together on the novel I was writing at the time. And I remember getting an email from you, maybe like a few times in that we had talked, and it started out saying, I think you're going to hate this email. and and then it went on to say like all the revisions you felt the book needed. And I remember my first thought being like, she's right, I hate this email. And then I thought, I love this email. And I was so grateful for the email.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So,
That's the
yeah.
It is
Right.
hard. It's really hard. I just, it's funny. I like editing my own work and other people's work because I do like looking at how it can be shaped. So, um, it's hard though. It is. I mean, it's easier to do it to somebody else's work
Yeah.
than my own work. And but yeah, it's good to go back over and over again. So, how long did it take you to find an agent?
It took me a year to
Yeah.
find an agent. And this, I should say too, I should follow all that up by saying there does come a point in revising when it does become a little bit dreaded when you've revised over and over and over. But I feel like if you can find the people, the readers, the people who support you, who really believe in what you're doing and they want you to revise, it can be super re-energizing. And so that's what happened with my agent. So it took me a year. I queried a lot of agents. I got a lot of requests for the manuscript, and people seemed to really love the idea, but there was always some issue with the manuscript itself. And a few months in to querying, I got asked to revise and resubmit with an agent, and it was kind of a big deal because she gave me a phone call and lots of editorial notes, and she seemed just super, super, excited and committed. And I thought, okay, this is it. And I worked for 3 months on a revision, felt very proud of it, and sent it back. And then she said, I don't think so. And she said, if you want to take one more stab at it, I'd be willing to read it again. And I thought, okay, let me take a few steps back and really think about what I want for this project, because if this person's not ready to sign, there's something going on. So I took more time. I got a couple more people that asked me to revise and resubmit. It wasn't as serious where they asked for phone calls, but they gave me, some substantial feedback and said I would be happy to look at it again. And so when all was said and done, I think there were 4 agents in that category. And I thought, if I'm going to revise this, I really need to revise it for myself because they all had different feedback.
Oh,
And it wasn't like I could find a pattern, it seemed very subjective. So I thought, okay, I just need to again, take a step back and really think what is this book? What does it mean to me? And I thought I was sort of at the end of my querying road. And then I learned about DV Pit, which is a Twitter pitching event for people who identify as being from a marginalized community. And I thought, okay, well, I'm queer. I guess that counts. So, and my book's queer. So I decided to shoot my shot, and I pitched on Twitter, and my agent, my now agent, requested my manuscript, and I sent it off thinking, okay, this, I've done this, I've been through this so many times. So I had very low hopes, but they're non-binary, and they were very excited about reading a book about a gender fluid character. So I thought, okay, maybe. And then a few weeks later, they offered me representation. So it took about a year. And then I got a few more offers from a few more agents. And they were all mostly new. And I really, really, really just liked my agent. Their name is Trevor Kettner at Ladderbird. And even though they were new to agenting, they were very steeped in the literary world and had worked in publishing, and just really loved my book. And it was such a different experience working with somebody who just really had a strong connection to the work and a really good editorial eye, and was giving me revisions, not because they felt that there was something flawed about the book, but because they wanted it to be the best possible version of itself. And it just opened me up completely to this idea of feeling like I had a teammate. Like, it suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. And I didn't really care if the book sold at that point. I just thought I was so happy to have this really talented, really enthusiastic partner, and so selling the book was sort of the icing on the cake. But I wish that for every writer. I thought I wanted the big, fancy, flashy agent that had years and years and years of experience. But what I really needed was the agent who just really liked my book and was just really down to earth and really kind and really willing to like get in there with me and just keep going.
That's fantastic. So, it sounds like you went with your gut feeling too. Like
Yeah.
you had persevered and done everything, but really ultimately it came down to what really felt right. And it wasn't just the first or the best, and it was just what I mean. The best was who you connected with, and knowing it was going to be right. And I think and there's some letting go, I think, in that part of what you said, where it's like, I don't care if I get published, I just like this collaboration. And I think
Yeah.
that's important in that whole process too. And maybe that's also part of keeping ourselves going as writers, is it is about taking that next you know, if your example is he did find somebody to publish it, and Algonquin's a fabulous publishing house, so you're in good hands. But even if it hadn't been published, and then you had another book, he's somebody who would have gotten you, or I think it sounds like you felt like it, and it's kind of nice to have that, like you said, that collaboration or partnership or something. And so
Right. And apologies, I just need to correct, their pronoun is they.
they, sorry, I that's my
It's okay.
fault. I'm an old lady. I'm working on it. I'm really trying. So,
I
but
am too.
but do
I
correct
am too.
me. But do correct me. Yes. And I don't even know who I called they, so that's okay. I mean, they or he or she or yeah. So anyway, so that's how bad I am. I've already forgotten what it was I was even applying to. But
It's
thank
all
you.
good. Yeah,
Thank
yeah. I'm trying to get better at all of that
No, and
myself.
the only way we get better is to persevere and keep saying,
Right.
right? So that's all part of it too. It goes in
Yeah.
everything. I mean, I really think it applies to everything. I do think that something like that is big. The changes in the world that are happening, and then trying to write a years long novel. It's hard just to keep things going like that. So it all applies. So we should talk about all of those kinds of perseverances.
Right. Well,
So,
actually, speaking of which, and we don't have to talk about this yet because I don't want to co-opt your plan, but it would be interesting to talk about. We went on submission with the novel literally the day after I went into lockdown.
oh
So
wow,
that took a lot of perseverance to decide to go on submission. And so basically, I was on submission for the pandemic.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, yeah, so January 28th was the date of my email that you told me. And I think you told me pretty early on. So you were almost exactly, the whole time. Just goes to show all kinds of things happen in a pandemic. Yeah, I got real deal during the pandemic too. So I felt a little guilty because there were all these
Yeah, me too.
people were having bad things happen to them. And I was like, oh, yay, I got something good.
I
But
know.
but yeah, no, there were also some positives to the pandemic. So one
Yeah.
of them is we all know how to use Zoom now. So
Right.
so I don't. Did you just hear my dog? Was
Yeah,
that?
which one is it?
Oh, it's the new one, Muttley. He's
Oh,
part basset, so he has this really loud, deep bark, and which is good and not, because my other dog Hazel, she has this really high pitched, piercing bark. So I kind of prefer his, but he doesn't like anybody to come to the door. So and I don't know what. There's some delivery today apparently. So anyway, so let's see. So So let's talk a little bit about some of your writing. You told us a little bit about this writing journey with this book, but can you tell us a little bit more about like how you came to writing? Because you mentioned earlier the bookbinder in papers, but and you had said things applied to your own life, but I know you because I know you personally. You're a bookbinder as well, so I don't. I'm curious. Were you? And I think I've asked you this before, but were you a bookbinder first and then a writer, or a writer, bookbinder, it all kind of came together? Or what's your writing journey? How'd you come to writing?
So I was always interested in writing, and for some reason didn't ever think to consider myself a writer. I mostly wrote in my journal, and it sort of just was part of my life. It was like a thread that ran through everything. And then I really considered myself an actor for most of my growing up, and I went to a conservatory for acting for my first year and a half of college. And then when I realized that that really wasn't the way that I wanted to express myself anymore, I changed schools and I became an English major. I majored in English lit, and so became very much more. I'd always been a big reader as well, so then I was reading, all the time and falling in love with books all over again. And also became very interested in just like the physicality of books at that point. So when I graduated and I moved to the city, um, I got into bookbinding just by complete coincidence. I just fell into it. I mean, I guess I was looking in the right places, but I ended up falling into it and really wanting to combine writing with book art, but not, again, considering myself to be a writer. And at that time, I was thinking of applying for my PhD to teach English literature. And I was working, a professor friend of mine lived a couple blocks away in Brooklyn. So I got in touch with him and I said, hey, would you write me a recommendation? And he was sort of helping me get my applications together. And at some point we started to become friends. And so at some point we were having dinner and he said, hey, I'm only going to say this once, I'm happy to support your application, but I really think you're going down the wrong path here. I really think that what you should do is follow your creative side. And I think that you're just going to feel that academia is going to crush your soul. And I don't know if he was right or not, but he definitely was right for me. I mean, I don't know if he was right about academia crushing people's souls, but he was right about it for me. And so I thought a lot about that, and I still didn't think about going into a creative career, but I just sort of I always kept doing things that involved writing. And so I was making book art, and I was also thinking about starting to write some short stories, and met a friend who said, no, let's write a film together. And so I said, okay, that'll be fun. So we wrote a film together, produced it as like a very, very super indie film. And I thought, well, that was fun. And I kind of got the writing bug from there. And then I had a child, and suddenly I didn't have time to work in my bindery. It was just too much setup, clean up. If I wanted to work for 15 minutes, it was like an hour commitment. And I just didn't have the time anymore. I couldn't collaborate with anyone on a film. I didn't know where to begin myself. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do anything creative, and I'm going to freak out if I don't, the only thing I can do is, I have these like 15-minute, 20-minute chunks of time when my son's sleeping. I'm just going to sit down. I'm going to try out my hand at this writing thing. I've always written. It's always been like adorned with all this other stuff. And what if I just sat down and just wrote? And that's what I did. And I was terrible at it. I was terrible. I mean, I remember showing my first short story to my friend, and she was like, you're switching POV here and you're switching again here. And I was like, what's POV? I didn't even know what she was talking about. And I was just determined. And I just said, well, I'm allowed to suck at it and I'll get better if I keep going.
That's good. That's good.
So,
Yeah. And they that determination, I think, makes a big difference. But you also brought up the fact that you had a child, and that was one of the things I was going to ask you, is because that's so you have all this other life going on besides just you know writing, and it sounds like you are able to manage to put it all together. And then on top of that, you've also had quite a few short stories published, which was also always impressive to me because you were always sending me new stories that were out. And you had a really great one out really recently, too. Do you want to tell us about any of those short stories? And also, then how do you do all that? I want to know how you do all of that and submit.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a full time job to submit pieces all the time.
Yeah, I've slowed down a little bit with that, but I think I need a break from novel writing. And I really like being able to start and finish something within a somewhat reasonable amount of time. It gives me a sense of accomplishment. And then I think because I was working toward someday publishing a novel, um, it kept me motivated to feel like I was, on the right track, that people were publishing my stories. And the most recent one I think is my favorite. I sort of get very, my short story writing is very different. It's just a different side of my writing personality that I don't know how to do in long form. And so it feels very freeing or experimental in that way for me. And so like the story I just published is called The Nipple, and it's a response to Philip Roth's terrible novella, The Breast. I'm looking that way because it's on my shelf over there. About a man who turns into a giant breast, and it's just so misogynistic and sort of like violent and weird, and it's so disturbing. And so I wrote this sort of feminist queer response to it called The Nipple, and it's about what happens to the relationship of a supposedly cisgender heterosexual couple when they find a nipple growing on their bedroom wall. And it got published in Black Warrior Review at the beginning of 2021 or the end of 2020. And it's definitely my favorite story, I think, that I've written, and the longest one I've written that's been published. So usually my very short pieces are the ones that get published. So it was exciting to see that one.
It's fabulous. I loved that piece. So I think people should look it up because
Thank you.
yeah, Black Warrior Review is very, it's a great place to get published in. So, but it is hard to be submitting stuff, querying agents, and then on top of that, writing, and then raising a kid and having a husband, and it's
And a job.
and a job. Oh, there's that.
Yeah, I think so. This is, when you asked me this, I thought, how much of this should I talk about? Because it feels a little morbid, but I think when I was in my 20s and even my early 30s, you feel like you have all this time ahead of you and all this possibility. And you do, right? Kind of like I had changed careers like twice or something by the time I was, before I was 30. I went from like publishing to bookbinding, and like I just felt like you could do anything you want. You just have to try. And then I had a baby, and I was 33 when he was born. And before he was born, I still had that feeling of like I've got my whole life ahead of me and I can do what I want. Oh, I had also gone to grad school by then. I had gone back to school for teaching. So anyway, then I had my son, and it took a really big toll on me. I mean, I love my son, but it took a toll on me physically, and it took a toll on me emotionally. And I think it took about 4 years before I really felt like I had sort of woken up from just being a new mom. It
Wow.
just took me a very long time to recover. And when I picked up my head, I was 37. My hair was graying, and I was looking around, and all the people applying for like programs that I might want to apply for were in their 20s, and I suddenly was like approaching middle age, and I was like, I can't just do anything I want anymore. I don't. So it seemed like that really short period between like my early 30s and my late 30s had sort of just, I emerged suddenly feeling like, oh my God, I'm out of time. Like if I want to do anything else, I have to do it now. And so that's why I say it's a little morbid. So I think that was what was motivating me to really want to learn how to write. I was like, it's something I can do. I can grab an hour here, 20 minutes here, I don't need anything to make it happen except for a notebook and a pen or a computer. And it was the one thing I felt like I could control. And so I was determined. I needed to do something creative. I knew that if I didn't, I just wouldn't ever be happy again. So
That's great. And so
yeah.
you were able to, so that's something that's hard for me, is finding that, like, if I have 20 minutes, saying to myself, I'm going to sit down and do something, because I often have that thought in my head is, oh, it's not enough time. So I end up, maybe I'll read instead or something, but I always think it's not enough. But I hear so many people that, and I've tried, and sometimes I do okay with it. I'm getting better at it. But you can do that. Like, can you just say, oh, I've got 20 minutes, I'll write down an idea, or you already have something going on? Or how does that work?
I think now it's harder than it was then. I think, when my son was really little and that was like all I had,
Mhm.
it was a sort of desperation of like, this is all I have. Like,
Right.
this is the only time I have, so I have to use it. And I also didn't know enough to know how much time it really took to get something right. Now my son is older, and so the way I handle things now is mostly by waking up very early in the morning before I would normally need to get ready for work. So I'm up, now that I'm in a pandemic and I don't have any commuting time, I wake up at 5:45. But before that, it might have been 5:15 or 5:30, and I would write for an hour and then get ready for work when the house was quiet. I didn't have all the things I needed to do for the day in my head, and it could just be me and my own voice on the page. And so I've continued that, and I've written most of my novels like a few hundred words at a time in the very early morning hours when everyone's sleeping. And then occasionally I have a very supportive husband and son, and so occasionally I'll go. There's um, um, a retreat colony, a writer's retreat colony, 5 minutes from my house on this beautiful property. And on their off season, they allow artists to come and have like a DIY retreat for $25 a night. And it's the Salt and Stall Foundation. And so I've spent many, many weekends there because it's only 5 minutes away. And I know that I could be home in a second if there was an emergency or something. And my son and my husband have a great weekend together, and I get thousands of words written, and catch up on projects that are lagging. So
Wow. That's great. I love that's nice to have a place like that so close. It's kind of
yeah.
a good thing. Yeah, I go a couple hours away to a little mountain retreat that somebody has, a little cottage I stay in that is great. There's deer, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But so, what's the longest you've gone without writing a word?
Honestly, I think a week, maybe two. I'm a little obsessive. I just can't not do it.
Just
Um,
that's good. Yeah.
yeah.
So, what motivates you to persevere even when you don't feel like it? Like, you're just like, yeah, not today.
Well, sometimes I will just say not today. I don't believe that a writer has to write every single day to be a writer. I do think that we need a break sometimes, and I allow myself to take it when I need it.
Mhm.
But I do think it was that morbid sense of like, I'm getting older. I'm now 47, and I was just like, I don't have that much time left. I gotta do this. Um, Now that I have the book deal, I do have to admit a little bit of like shell shock or PTSD or something of, just feeling like, God, I need a break. So I'm still sort of getting up and I'm working on this book that I'm working on now, but I'm not working on it with the same level of discipline at all. And I think I just needed some time to be like, okay, I achieved this very big thing. I need to just take a step back. But I think, okay, so the other thing is that I have to work, and I work full time, and I I just don't have that much time, and I don't want the only things I do in my life to be to have a job and take care of a house. I just feel there's something about that that just doesn't feel okay to me. And so if I have to do those things, and that's fine. I mean, I enjoy my job, but I'm not passionate about it. So I need to have that thing in order to make all of the other things feel like they have a bigger purpose, I guess. And that's my bigger purpose.
That's a great motivator, because even if you, like you said, you feel like, okay, I need a break or etc., but there is still this. Um, I mean, I imagine after some of the time wears off from the book deal too, you'll probably be like, okay, now I need to, it'll be that morbid sense again of I need to get the second one done.
Yeah.
There'll be something along those lines. So,
Yeah.
what do you think of perfection in art and writing, or either one or both? And do you feel like perfection gets in your way? Excuse me.
Funny because I have some friends, and I've heard a lot of people say that I think the idea of perfection gets in the way more in the beginning of their process. Um, whereas I think I mentioned earlier, I sort of made a conscious decision to fail. I was working for some people that were publishing an academic journal, and I was supporting their efforts, and I was working really hard at it. And I realized just how much I had done that in my life and how much I had not put the same level of support behind my own work. And so I think at a certain point, I just thought I'm allowed to put myself out there, and I'm allowed to fail just like anyone else, and I'm allowed to get better. And so I just sort of said, I'm going to do this and it's going to be bad, and that's okay. I'll fix it later. And I think that's why I love revising so much, is because I know my first drafts are not good. They're just not good. I'm doing the best I can to get the right words out, but I just don't think that that will ever be good. So I just put that aside. And I don't strive for perfection when I'm drafting. I think where perfection gets in the way for me is when I start to get feedback. And I think this is true for every unseasoned writer, which I had been for quite a while, where you start getting feedback from people and thinking, oh, I have to do what they're saying. There's something wrong and I have to fix it in order for my book to be good. And when I was querying and I was getting these revise and resubmit requests from agents, I thought, well, if only I can revise it perfectly and do exactly what they want, it'll get me where I need to be. And it was a really hard process, because I had to really come to terms with the fact that there was no perfection there. When I would get feedback from, so for example, from that first agent, who I'm sure meant well. I mean, she clearly was a big fan of my book, but she gave me all these great revision notes. And then when I came back with the revision, she came back with totally different notes about things that I thought, whoa, this is a huge part of the book. Why didn't you say this before? Um, and and then also I would have, I've had some situations in my writing group where I'd get feedback from somebody and I would make a big change based on that. And then my now editor, when she was asking me for revisions, was asking me to basically undo the changes I had done based on what my writing group member had said. And so it wasn't that one of them was wrong or right. It was just that you have to realize at a certain point that the work is yours, and that the people who, I think I said this before when I was talking about Trevor, but I feel the same way about my editor at Algonquin. When you find the people who really just are drawn to your vision and are drawn to your project, and they're helping you revise, I think you realize that there's no such thing as perfection. There's just finding your readers and finding the people who want to help you write the best possible version of your book, and then trusting in that process, but knowing that you're never going to achieve perfection. And it just took me a long time and a lot of experience to learn that, and it's been very freeing
Yes.
for me. Yeah.
It's interesting. We've kind of come full circle because one of the things I think is also important is I talked earlier about your gut feeling with Trevor, and then I think there's something about having a gut feeling about what are the um, edits to take, to accept. What are the ones that are like, yes, this rings true to me. This is my intention with the book. This is, or even sometimes, oh, I hadn't thought of that, and that sounds good, because sometimes it'll be, I hadn't thought about that, but I don't know. So it's sort of about finding that gut reaction again, and it sounds like you learned that with all of the noise that was coming in from the different agents, I guess it was, and then other people as well. But that's
Yeah.
good.
And when I was on submission and I got one of the revisions that I got back from my editor was so the backstory of the person in my book who wrote the letter that's hidden under the end papers, the backstory was a Holocaust story. And it was about a third of the book was about her background and her experience in the Holocaust and being a lesbian teenager during the Holocaust. And it had been that way for the whole life of the book. And my editor came back to me and said, the editorial board has a request, and I want you to think long and hard about it. They love everything about the book, but they don't want the backstory of that character to be the Holocaust. They want it to be something else. And, don't do it to chase a book deal. Think about it, see how you feel. And I thought, my first thought was like, what? No, that's the book. And my second thought was, I've always been slightly concerned about that plot line. And if I could come up with something I like better, then I could be super proud of this book and super excited to rewrite about a third of it. And if I don't come up with something I like better, I'm going to walk away. And I had to do a lot of soul searching. And I spent a couple of days thinking about it. And I came up with something that I was very excited about. And I thought, if they like it, I'm going to do it. And if they don't like it, I might do it anyway and try to sell it to someone else. And that's how I knew
Yeah.
that I wanted to do it, because it was like, even if they said, you know what, we're not psyched about this idea, I was so excited about it by that point that I knew I needed to try it, that I would regret not trying it. And so I wrote a new backstory, and it took me a couple of months, and they liked it. So the book is not, the book is not it has no Holocaust in it. It has a little bit of Holocaust in it, but it's not about the Holocaust anymore.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So that is fascinating too, because what if that person had never asked you that? You might have kept, and maybe nobody else would have asked that.
Mm-hmm.
Would have kept going with that, and it's sort of interesting to see how that's what I think of. It is such a subjective business, and so we can't be perfect, and we do have to keep persevering, because there is no way of knowing what's right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong, right? So
Yeah.
we have to kind of just hit the spots. And but I love that story, because if that one person hadn't said, or that editorial board hadn't said, could you change this? um and a lot of people, ego gets in the way of a lot of people. When I ask people about this like that, I interview about perseverance all the time, and from like my book and stuff, so
Mm-hmm.
many people say ego gets in their way. Um, I'm sort of the opposite, in that I don't have an ego, because if somebody said, "Would you do this?" I'd be like, "Okay." But I have, as I've gotten older, learned to think about it first, and then
Yeah.
okay. So, but I think that's good. That's a great part of the story, was we have to be open to things and knowing what works, and knowing it works for us, I guess I should say.
Right.
That's the key. So,
Right.
so I have one more thing I wanted to ask you about. If you have a writing tip or writing exercise that you want to share with us.
Yeah. I tend not to do formal exercises, I realized when you asked me that question, but I do have, so I've always been totally fascinated by people. And, you know, if I go to an art museum, I just want to look at the portraits of people or the sculptures of people. And I mean, I like the other things, but the thing that's always drawn me to both art and literature is character and people. So one of the things that I realized that I do, because at first I thought, oh, I don't do any exercises. And then I thought, oh, actually I do, because I have this great book I brought over here. It's a book full of photographs of people.
Two great.
And there are all kinds of photographs in
yeah.
here. So I'm not being very great at holding them up, but it's Annie Leibovitz. And anyway.
And Susan Sontag? What does Susan Sontag have in it? Is she?
She wrote, I think she wrote an essay. It's funny, I haven't even read it. Oh yeah, Essay by Susan Sontag. Okay. I just look at these photographs and they're so evocative to me anyway. Like some of them are famous people and then there's like just this young teacher.
Yeah. Is that what it says it is?
Is it, did you say, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Oh, is it a teacher? Did you say, is it a teacher? It's a teacher?
She's a teacher, yeah. And it says their professions, and there are, you know, strippers in here and politicians and, you know, athletes and like everything you could imagine. And so I often, if I'm, for my short stories in particular, if I'm stuck on something, I'll often go to this book and just flip through until I see somebody that I really wonder about. And then I'll sort of make up a character based on that. And similarly, when I was writing that first novel that I was working with you on, I had gone online and looked up some portraits and found some portraits of people that I felt like were my characters. And it helped me to have that visual, and I pasted them in my notebook. So I could just look at those pictures because it was something about their expressions or something about the way the photograph was that allowed me to sort of, if I looked at them, I felt like I could know them better. So I think visuals for me, whether it's looking at art or photography, there's something about that gets me thinking more deeply about plot or character, but mostly it's character. I feel like almost everything I do starts with character and then the plot comes from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. My first novel started with I was in a writing workshop and somebody scattered magazine pictures on the table and said, pick one and then write from it. And I picked a picture of a woman that reminded me of a great aunt I have. And I just started writing from her. Didn't even know her that well, but that's who the main character was. And that's where she came from, was a photo. But it was just a magazine photo of some older woman that owned a cafe. So
sometimes there's just something in the eye.
Yeah, I think recognizing something about or curious about something about them. I think for me, it's like when I see a picture of people, I want to know their story, so I write it. Yeah. I think that's always a good writing prompt, good way to start. And then, but I do want to ask you too about the novel that we worked on together. Where is it these days? Is it? Are you think you might go back to it, or do you think you learned a lot from it and are moving on? Or
it's funny. I would like to share it with my agent, and they have expressed interest in reading it. It doesn't feel like the right follow-up to Endpapers, but I do love it. I think I'll always have a very special place in my heart for that book. So I'm really curious to show it to Trevor anyway, just because they have such a great editorial eye. Like the way that they helped me shape Endpapers before we took it out on submission was just really, really special. And so I'm really curious to see, do they think it's worth reviving? And is there something maybe I haven't thought about that I could do with it? I have another novel I want to write, so I'm sort of like want to just like move on, but I did reread that novel about a year ago, maybe right after we went on submission. I sent it to Trevor and then things happened and they never got to read it, but I did reread it so that I could make sure it was in good enough shape to send to them. So I still like it. I don't know. I just don't know where it fits in with what I'm doing right now.
You never know in revision what might happen. So it was
Yeah.
a great story, and so much of it as I'm talking to you is coming back to me too. And I get invested in the stuff that I work on, and so even though it's not mine, I'm like, oh, but I want to know what happens.
Yeah.
I think of them as
You'll be the first to know.
yeah, I'll do yeah, definitely, right? So yeah, the two kids are I'm endeared to them as little kids, and then the sister when she's older, it's like I want to know, how she gets by. So yeah, so and then I have to ask this question because I'm a pie person. So if you had a piece of pie every time you sat down to write, would you eat it before you started writing, after, or during?
Hmm.
Or would you even eat pie? I mean, I still will like you if you don't like pie.
Who wouldn't eat pie?
I know, right? I should actually require that before I ask anybody to interview.
Yeah, I think you should. Um, when would I eat it? I think it would depend on what I was sitting down to write. I know that's not the answer you want, but I want to say, all right, I'll just say like my first gut feeling was I would eat it while I was writing, but then I feel like I wouldn't really enjoy it as much. So maybe before.
So maybe you could start it, and then if you wanted to just go ahead and eat the whole thing, you could. That's what I would do.
Hmm.
I would think it would linger, but it never lasts that long.
Right. All
So
right. What kind of pie did you make any pies today?
not today, I didn't. But let's see. I made chicken hand pies last weekend for the. We went on a picnic on Sunday, so I took hand pies, and then I have this new. I have the recipe right here that I haven't tried it yet. It's a shaker lemon pie. You're from up in that part of the world, so you probably know shaker lemon, but this one has fresh ginger in it. So it just sounded really good
Oh,
with the lemon. I know. So I'm going to try that one.
wow. That
No, if
sounds
you're
really good.
closer, I would bring one over to you for
I
doing.
know. Every time I see your pie posts, I'm just so sad that we're like across the country from each other.
No, I need to figure out Gold Belly or whatever the shipping food thing is. Except I don't think I cook enough to do it. But anyway, yeah, food delivery. So I need to figure it out. But
There was a pie that somebody who used to live in Ithaca used to make that I really should make because it was so delicious. But every year when the sun gold tomatoes were ripe, she would make a pie crust and throw in sun gold tomatoes, olive oil, garlic, basil, and Parmesan cheese.
mm, oh, you're
So
making
good.
yeah. That sounds really good. And then was it
So
then
good.
roasted? Like the tomatoes were nice and roasted when she
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. No top on the pie. It was a whatever you call an open faced pie.
tart. It was probably she probably maybe
It
they
was a tart.
yeah, tomato
Yeah.
tart. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Oh, that sounds good. And I should have brought something to. Are you drinking a little bit of whiskey?
I'm drinking a little bit of scotch, a tiny
Scotch?
bit.
Good writer. All right. I should have brought a glass of wine instead of my water bottle. Things I'll learn as I proceed in these interviews. So, see, there's all about persevering always creates more lessons for all of us. So I'm going to say thank you for the time. And oh my God, all of this was so fabulous. And
Thank you
then,
for having me.
yeah, is there any last words you want to share with us?
Um, I
Anything I
feel like I talked a lot.
great. You're great.
I will say that Amy's a great mentor. So if anyone is lucky enough to have Amy as a mentor,
Oh, thank
um,
you.
it was a wonderful experience. And it was part of persevering. That was a big part of it for me because I had been, I had tried to apply to MFA programs, but I was really limited in how many I could apply for because of my situation, having a house and a baby and a job. And financial resources. So I had been rejected twice from the few programs that were local that would have been a free ride. And so I really thought I was at a standstill. I wasn't sure what to do or how I would get the training I wanted. And then this AWP program opened up and I got to work with you. And it was really something that gave me that little like near the beginning of my journey that gave me that little encouragement that I needed to say, okay, this is worth pursuing, and working with you was just such a great experience, and making me feel like, yes, you can write a novel, you can query agents, you know. So working with you has been great. I think that the writer to writer mentorship program is great, and I feel very fortunate that I found that, and I found you and your support, especially at that time.
Oh,
So
thank you. Yeah, no, and actually, I one of the things I liked about that program, and one of the reasons I wanted to support it, was because they advertised it, at least in the beginning, that it was sort of a substitute for an MFA program, in that you could have that one-on-one connection with someone, and it was for people who couldn't go to MFA programs, or they kind of billed it as that. And I agreed. I thought, and I loved the whole process was great. So, and you just did a great job. I loved your book, and I felt like we really connected, and it was great to. It's a great way to meet a friend. So yeah. So
yeah.
now we got Zoom, which is fantastic. I bet it's very different
Yeah.
now with Zoom, when we used to do things on phone calls and emails. So different
Yeah.
world. So
Yeah.
all right. Well, I'm gonna pause and then we can just chat for a second. But I thought this was fantastic. I thought,
Oh, good.
yeah, I thought, oh my God, your answers were so perfect. And sometimes I'd be like, I felt like I was like, oh, I should do that. Um, but it was, and the interesting thing is, I was like, I was just sort of, I wanted to do this, but I realized as I was doing it, there's so many things I'm going to learn as well, too. Like just hearing your process and hearing everybody's different way of getting things done and what they believe in and how they, because it was interesting, because one of the things I in my book, my How to Write a Book in 20 Pies, is novels take so long. So that's why I started making pie. It was because I just wanted something done. I just
Yeah.
wanted something done that was creative and I could eat it in the end. And
And
then
know that it was good.
right? And then I really can't do this. I don't want to keep you. I'll let you go, and I should probably walk my dogs.
Well, thank
Um,
you for this was very fun, and
no, and thanks for
good practice for me too, just to get up and get in front of someone and talk about my book. And
yeah.
I'm nervous about all of that. So
Oh, you're gonna do a great job. You're gonna do a great job, and I love your bow ties. So definitely do the bow ties.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I thought if we were on video, I should be fancy a little bit.
Yeah,
So
no, I like it. I like it. So, all right. Well, I'll try to edit. I'm learning that too.
okay.
I have done some of that before, so I'm gonna try to edit and see what I can put together. And then, like I said, I'm also gonna see about doing. I might do. I think if I do a podcast, I might do both, but I don't know. Big ideas.
Okay.
All
Well, let
right.
me
All right. Okay. Well. All right. Take care, Jen.
you
Good talking
too.
to you.
All right, talk to you
Bye.
soon. Bye.